In this episode, we're going to have a nice weekly wrap over here, focusing in on the S&P 500. We're going to be taking a look here at the Nasdaq, also closing up on today's session 2.2%, as well as the Dow. We're going to focus in on the dollar and take a look at gold, silver, and Bitcoin. We're going to do all that together right now. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're not, welcome back. This is Jordan with Conquer Trading and Investing. We're going to start over here with the equity markets. We're going to start with the S&P 500. As we get into the Nasdaq next, I'm going to be showing you something very important here, something that I missed today in this morning session, something that I would like to be more aware of going forward. And by reviewing something like that, it could help us all out. So we're going to look at that next. First, let's focus here on the S&P 500. If you start here on the daily time frame, you can see first of all that this resistance, we closed above it, it's now support. All right, we'll start here actually on the daily time frame. I still see that we're seeing this descending wedge, right? This descending wedge pattern form over here. It is possible, looking at it in this light, that we get a breakout above, back above over here, this trend line over here. It's the trend line that is below the prime trend line. Getting back above the prime trend line, getting back above 33.39, that resistance, that will open up some further follow through to the long side. At that point, we'll be getting very bullish. Still below it right now, drop down to the 8-hour with me. You could see that we're closing into this trend line resistance right here. We're not only closing into resistance right here, we do have resistance above that we just pointed out, that 33.39. It's a big resistance. However, at the same time, I pointed out that descending wedge for you. You could see that trend line. Just follow my mouse right now as I go ahead and make it. We're on the verge of breaking out above that. Okay, so what happens next week? All right, two things that I'm focused in on. I'm focused in on mainly on this wedge over here. So I'm going to go ahead and draw this in and tighten this up for you just to make this a little bit clearer. So we're going to make it like exact, and we're going to go to today's high just to give us some clarity. All right, I want this to be really clear going into next week. I hope this analysis gives you a little bit of an edge going to next week so that on Monday beforehand, you kind of already have a plan in place of what levels you're looking for. That's why I'm doing this, and I hope that it's helpful for you as well. What happens if we get a rejection over here? Is that something that you're looking to short? A rejection of this trend line over here? This is option number one. If we are rejected over here, and assuming that we make a lower low during London, right? A lower low than the Asian session, below this bit of support over here at 32.76, that does open up a short. We'd be looking at to take the weekly low from this week and targeting into the bottom portion of this descending wedge. So that's one setup that could possibly occur. Another setup we're looking is if we actually do get this breakout over here above this trend line. You can see that we are closing into resistance from the wedge, the trend line from the wedge, as well as this hope trend line over here. Breaking out above it, right, probably would send us into 33.39, that big resistance over there. Look over here, you could see this was pretty big support. It should now act as pretty big resistance. It has once already over here. Probably if we break above that trend line, we pop into there, and then we'll look for a retest of this trend line. If we get a retest and a resumption off that trend line, coming back above 33.39, that would be an excellent place to go long. I don't think before then, right? Is it possible that we break out above, we get a lot of momentum on the opening, and we break out above 339? Of course, right? At that point, you'll be looking for price to run into resistance right over here. That's the prime trend line. Maybe then come back. If it stops and this resistance is flipped into support, that's also a good place for a long entry. Or if this comes back all the way down into that trend line and then resumes up, that's a place for an entry. That's a pretty clear plan going into next week on the S&P 500. That's what we're doing this here for, is clarity. Let's take a look at the Nasdaq. And before we look at what's next on the Nasdaq, I do want to point out maybe where I could have improved my performance over here. Okay, everyone knows, anyone who was a participant of this morning's live stream, right? They do know that we were looking over here. This was overnight, the short trade over here, right? The test into resistance, the resumption down right here. This was resistance at the time. And then as soon as you came into that support, what do? You move your stop loss to break even. That all is well and good, and there's nothing wrong with a break even trade. However, when I say hindsight, all right, This is, in real time, I was not even looking for this. I was not looking at the short side. I was not looking at the long side whatsoever. I was only looking for sell side trades here below this prime trend line. However, I just want to point this out for you, right? Let's rewind over here. Let's assume that someone was in the short trade. As soon as you came into the support below, you moved your stop loss to break even and you were stopped out here during the New York Open over here around that time. Now I want you to notice a couple of things over here. Again, this is just for improving your overall perception going forward. Okay? Do you see that we were above the support over here? Right? What kind of support is that? That's that channel support. That's the channel resistance. Okay? At the time we were stopped out at break even during New York, we were above this support over here. Do you see what happened? Do you see when price came back into the support, above the support over here? Do you see that it also came down and retested that support, right? And it was a successful retest as price resumed up. This right here, when price made a higher high, that was at a really, really attractive time of day. Now, it was a Friday, and it was during New York, but it was before London closed. Before London closed, right? Now, I would have to think back in the day. When I say back in the day, I'm talking 18, 19 years ago when I was trading the E-mini futures, and I was trading much more actively, averaging 5-7 trades a day on an average day. That's probably something I would have leaned into. This is on the 8-hour time frame though. And I just want everyone to see, because I wasn't looking for it, I want everyone to see that's a clean setup. It's something that I should have been aware of. And the only reason I'm spending time on it and pointing it out is so that maybe next time it occurs, I'm going to be a little bit more on my game. I want you to see over here, number one, two things I want you to focus in on. We closed above. We were right here above that support, that channel support. We came over here. We tested back into that support. And then the entry right over here was also above this horizontal support at the time. That's a good clean entry right into the resistance where we are right now. If I were in that trade, which I'm of course not, if I was in that trade, what would I do? As I came into the resistance, right? That's a pretty nice risk reward going in there right there. I would take a small piece off, move my stop loss to break even, and now I'm holding a power position going into next week. Let's take a look for those who are like myself are not in any trades of how to approach this now going forward into next week, right? Let me clean this up a little. This, by the way, I'll show you on the daily time frame, has closed above that resistance. That's a big deal for the Nasdaq, by the way. Closing, and that's now support. However, it's clear as day we're closing in right on the resistance, right? You could see this prime trend line resistance, and we're closing right below it. We have not broken it. What's the play on Friday? What happens if over here, let's say this is what the Asian candle looks like. Something like this, right? If then in London you make a lower low right below this support over here, right? Is that a short entry? Yeah, that's definitely a good looking short entry. No question about it. That's one possibility. Right now we're trading from both sides. Why are we trading from both sides if we're above this support in this channel right now? Because if you step back, we're clearly also below this prime trend line. This was support all the way up. That's now resistance. No problem trading both ways. No problem at all. We looked at that on the S&P as well. If we're rejected here, that opens up. Did you hear my voice crack right there? If this opens up a resistance right here, rejection by the wedge resistance and by this rising trend line resistance, that opens up a short. We talked about that just earlier. On the same breath, we talked about where we could see the long side. We're trading both sides of the market right now. Now, what about looking for a long trade? If you're not in this trade, you have a couple of different options, right? It is quite possible that we're rejected over here initially, maybe during the Asian session, and this support holds. This level over here of 11,066, that could hold. And a resumption off. Do you take the buy entry into this prime resistance right over here? If we make a higher, if Asia trades down like this, and then you make a higher high, and since the entry is coming right at the resistance point, that's a good looking entry for sure. The other thing that could happen, you want to be prepared for all different situations and scenarios, is that we continue rising above here. We have resistance right there. Let me make it darker right now since it's back into play. Right? We have resistance right over there. That's coupled, let me also make this a little bit darker. It's not the prime trend line, but you can see we have resistance right over here that's coming in at 11,280. Quite possible that's where the initial rejection comes. If that happens, watch to see if this holds this trend line. If it does, and you get an entry over there, that's a smart place to take an entry, even though you have this resistance right above you. You're aware of the resistance, okay? Don't forget, we've talked about it all week. It's not until we get above this channel over here that things open up to the upside. All of this is possible. At the end of the day, do not follow. I mean, of course, everyone's aware of what's going on. Everyone's saying there's no stimulus coming, therefore the market, equity markets have no reason to rally. At the end of the day, whether they go up or down, we're following price and we're reactive off of the technicals. That's what we do over here. Try not to paint yourself into a corner. Try not to overthink it. Let's follow price and trade accordingly. We're going to skip over the Dow. All right, I'll give you just a brief look. Actually, let me just clean this up for next week. We've cleared above this support over here. So positive price action, go just onto Friday, right? But overall for the week, not so much. Dow had a very, very down week, actually. You can see that we're still trading within this channel. And until you get above this resistance over here, which would be a breakout of that channel, as well as horizontal resistance at 27,440. Once we get above there, this looks a lot better to lean into at that point, right? But it's still got a lot of work to do. I would be focused more on the S&P and also the Nasdaq. Let's take a look at the dollar before we do. Let me open up a chart for you. This is the Bloomberg Dollar Index, and you can see this green arrow over here pointing up. It's also a trend line. If you go ahead and you just kind of line that up a little bit different, right? Focusing on this little bit of support over here. Over here, that then became resistance, and you can see that's resistance over there. Interesting, right? There's a couple other things I want to show you on the Bloomberg Dollar Index. We've just have come up into resistance. Do you see that resistance over here? 2 touches of support. Again, it was tested over here. That we're into some resistance here. All right. By the way, you look at FX futures positioning against the dollar. They were record positioning short against the dollar. This is a little bit of short covering we saw this week. Let's look at the chart over here. Very, very bullish. We've had the counter trend breakout above 94 on the DXY over here. Not only did we break out above it, setting off the counter trend, which means I expect this move to last. And you can see over here that we pulled back, retested it, and resumed off, making a higher high. That's all bullish price action occurring on the DXY over here. Now we're targeting over here around 95.20 as the first area of resistance to look for a possible rejection. Okay, this area over here next week, it's a big area. That's a place that I'm looking for a little bit of difficulty for the DXY to get through. We'll see what happens. Now, is it possible the dollar comes back and tests 94 again and resumes off it? If we get another retest of 94, we're looking for the dollar to hold support and resume off it until it doesn't. As long as we're trading above 94, this counter trend move on the dollar is well into place, okay? If we lose 94, that's like the first warning sign, right? We have this little bit of resistance over here, this trend line. That will be the first warning sign. We'll be walking each other through it, and then it would be a break of 93.50, which would say that was probably a failed breakout over there, and we'll monitor it accordingly. Not much else to say over there, except let's look at gold, right? We looked at gold. Everyone saw that this trend line over here, right? Once we lost it, technically, I called the bull market over. Now, I do believe, and a lot of people obviously have different opinions. That's all well and good. I believe that fundamentally, that we are definitely in a bull market here on the precious metals. I believe precious metals are currently on sale, and anyone accumulating physical stuff should continue to do so for sure. Now, I'm looking at this from trading it from a swing trader's perspective. We broke down below this trend line. Not only that, we then popped up into resistance and resumed down. That's a short signal. Actually, if you missed it, watch the live stream. At the beginning, we talk about gold and silver. I talk about where the best placement for stop losses would be if you go short over here. It was a beautiful session. The first 24 minutes are actually phenomenal. I do suggest that. Same thing here on silver, right? Same exact thing. Broke down important technical levels, right? Did pop into resistance and is so far being rejected. And I also talked about where your stop losses would be on silver and why silver warrants a tighter stop loss than the gold in this current situation. All right, and here you can see this week as yields surged higher, it brought down gold down lower with it. If you ask me what is the trend when it comes to the yields in the future, of course that is going to be lower and lower, and it's going to be gold higher and higher. You could see here also that silver had its worst week actually since March. Well, and you remember what happened after March, right? This is silver's worst week since March. And then after that, gold went on actually to surge. Could we see a similar formation over here? Or will the metals continue to be under pressure? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. I can't see the future. But I can tell you when either one of gold or silver gets back into a bullish formation, right now, they're both showing weakness. And we're looking here at opportunities to sell. I am not selling either one of them on the paper. I will not. I think it's entirely risky. We're just looking at from an educational standpoint and watching and calling the market as it unfolds. Over here, you could see this is equity markets. Over here, you could see the S&P consensus 12-month forward earning per share. You could see that's rising now. That is rising right now. But at the same time, there is a huge disconnect even still as the S&P comes down a little, right? That those jaws still need to be shut. Either S&P is going to come crashing back down, or we're going to see this forward momentum continue and the 12 months earning per share estimates continue to rise, or a combination of the both. Over here, you could see, by the way, the Fed has only $9 million of ETF purchases this week. You could see that the Fed has been off the gas now ever since, let's call it the end of the July, ever since the beginning of August, and with good reason. The markets have been really, the bubble had been blown back. We saw Nasdaq trading at new all-time highs, S&P trading at new all-time highs. Dow was on the verge of making new all-time highs, rightfully so. The Fed backed off at the right time, and we will see. And markets hanging in there, don't you think? Don't you think? Let's see what happens. There is the Fed put in there, but in my opinion, if we do get further pain on the equity markets, there's going to come a point when all of a sudden you're going to see these purchases start to pick up again. Let's also take a look here at Bitcoin over here, which is this week taken out the 10,570 resistance, flipped it into support, and is resuming off of it. Bitcoin over the weekend, not only Bitcoin, also the rest of the crypto market should give a good indication of the sentiment that we're going to be looking at as the markets open on Monday, right? And depending on what happens this weekend with crypto, meaning what happens, like if Bitcoin is able to maintain the momentum and is able to go over here and test this next bit of resistance in this area, right? That's going to be pretty healthy for the open on the equity markets for sure. If Bitcoin fails below 10,005, this support over here at 10,570, that would probably signal that we're going to have a little bit of further declines next week. And we all know the levels on the equity markets that we're looking to lean into. All right, just wanted to give you a quick update over here so that everyone has that clarity going into next week. I hope you all have a great weekend and look forward to seeing you on Monday. Take care, everybody.